everyone, Annabelle here with AoP Tech, and today we're going to take a look at one of the G Suite's most versatile tools, Google Forms. As part of our Connected Educators webinar series, Technology Integration Coach Mr. Heintz takes us through an intro to this platform, as well as how this tool can be used effectively for student assessments.
So good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us here tonight. It's truly an honor and a privilege to meet with you guys and hopefully share some helpful information. So first off, how can Google Forms be used? In short, anytime that I'm collecting information, Google Forms is a great tool. So it kind of started out as a survey tool, and then, like I said, teachers started to kind of hack it, if you would. And so we have this quiz feature that Google integrated into the Google Forms. The third usage that I've really found is, and I'm going to show you a demonstration of this, is when I want to enter information into a spreadsheet, and to go through and actually individually enter into each cell would be a little cumbersome. This provides a new user interface, and it allows me to quickly bookmark something, walk through my classroom, and enter information into a spreadsheet without having to actually be in a spreadsheet program like either Excel or Sheets. And one of the most innovative ways I've actually seen it being used, I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, so I grew up reading Choose Your Own Adventure books, and I always really enjoyed, I would like post a note the pages and be like, do you get out of the car? And I'd flip and I'd read, and be like, no, and I'd go back. And so I actually have seen teachers use a very similar feature in Google Forms. And instead of just advancing to the page, a lot of times there's you have to complete a math problem. And if you get the answer correct, you get to move on. And if you get the answer wrong, you go back. So a really kind of innovative way that I've seen teachers using Google Forms in their classrooms. To get to Forms, there's a variety of ways that you can get to Forms. The simple one would be typing in forms.google.com in the URL. If you add a /create, and this is true for any Google application, whether it's docs.google.com or sheets.google.com or slides.google.com, and when you add create, it's going to take you directly to a blank document. The third way would be to go to the waffle, scroll down, hit more, keep scrolling, click on the little purple Forms icon, or you can access it through Drive by clicking on the New, then More, and then Forms button. All of them are fine. I'm actually, now normally I would do the second one here, the forms.google.com/create, but today I want to start off by showing you Forms Home. So if I type forms.google.com, it's going to take me to the Forms home screen. Now down below I can see previous forms that I've used, but what I want to highlight here is the template gallery, because I always love the pre-made templates. Anything that can save me time as a teacher is something that is very helpful. So when you go to the template gallery and if you click on General, you will see that they have pre-populated an exit ticket, an assessment, worksheets, a course evaluation, and then as you scroll down, there's some other helpful ones. I mean, whether it's a party invite or an RSVP, but I actually particularly like the T-shirt sign up. I know that when I was in high school, I ran FBLA, I was part of the debate team, and so we were always getting shirts or collecting money or candy sales, and Form is a great way to keep that information, and so they actually have a T-shirt one pre-made, and then they also have some further ones. So I know that a lot of schools, in terms of their IT department, actually will use Forms for work requests. If you need, your projector bulb is burned out, you can use a Google form and it actually will send directly to the individual responsible for that. So a really great tool. So now what I want to do is I'm actually going to jump into just a blank form right off to start. And looking across the top, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to title this for us. So this will be AoP Tech Forms. And when I click up here, that title is going to go right onto the top corner, which is a really nice feature. Now, my screen might appear a little different than the one you may look at, specifically this button right here. I have several add-ons, and add-ons are Google's way of kind of customizing a lot of their platforms. This is something that I'm going to come back to at the end of the presentation when I get to kind of the advanced or power users tip. So moving from left to right, the first tool is just a simple color palette, and you can choose different colors. Oh, sorry about that. Additionally, in the bottom right-hand corner, you have a plethora of pre-made Google backgrounds. Some are fun. You can choose one specifically for education, or if you're a coach, you could certainly choose some. You also have the ability to upload your own pictures as well. Next to the color palette icon, we have the little eyeball icon. Now, this is universal across a lot of Google's platforms as a preview. And I really recommend, as you are building your form, that you do click on the preview button. When I click on the preview button, it'll actually open up, and this would be what right now, if I were to send this form out, granted there's nothing in it, this is what people would see. So it's always helpful just to kind of check on that preview icon. One quick note, so I just X'd out of this tab to return to my Google form. You also can click on the little pencil. That will take you back to the editing screen as well. Next to the eyeball, we have the little cogwheel, and this is a universal Google symbol for settings. So I want to walk you through some of the settings menu because there's some really great features in here. So when I click on the settings menu, the first one up top here, we have the ability to collect email addresses. Now, later in my presentation, I'm going to focus on the quizzes element of this, and this is something that if I'm giving a quiz, I will enable this. Now, normally one of my first questions in any survey that I'm going to do, unless it's an anonymous survey, which can be very helpful in terms of feedback, I usually will ask students to write in their name. By collecting their email address, if they've logged into your school domain, by capturing that, it kind of keeps them a little honest. So if you were giving a quiz and you were concerned about, well, what if someone were to sign in and say that they're Johnny and take the quiz for Johnny when they're really not, by collecting their email address, you have that ability to say, well, wait a second, you were signed under this name and you wrote this name. So I like to click this box, especially when I'm giving quizzes. Now, one of the ways that I use Google Surveys, or Google Forms, excuse me, is on back to school night. On back to school night, my first year I had like the long piece of paper, and then after a really wonderful back to school night, I had a torturous time sitting there trying to read the parents' handwriting and be like, is that a 0, is that an O, is that an S or a 5? And I stopped doing that. And so really what I would do is I would have, from then on, when they walked into my room, I actually had a bank of devices, and I started off with iPads, and I moved to laptops, and eventually Chromebooks, and I have 4 or 5 Chromebooks set up. And as they come in, there was a form, and it asked for their basic contact information and their child's name, and that way I knew that I had their most up-to-date cell phone and email address, and it was really helpful to kind of have that contact information. Now, if you're going to be sending a form to anyone outside of your domain, you want to make sure that you uncheck this box. And I'm certainly guilty of this. I created a form, I sent it out, and all of a sudden I got these people email and say, hey, I can't get to it, why not? 9 times out of 10 it's because I did not open this up to outside users. Now, if you're doing a quiz and you only want to quiz, obviously, your students in your classroom, then this is one more added way to kind of make sure that it's those students who are taking the quiz, no one else. Below this one, we have an option to limit to 1 response. Now, sometimes I actually encourage multiple responses. So, for example, when I had that back to school sign up, what I wanted it to do is I had the Chromebook set up in the kiosk mode. So it would automatically return to the original form, and people could start taking the evaluation. And so I would actually uncheck that. Now, if I'm doing a quiz, obviously I only want students to take the quiz one time, so I would make sure to limit to one response. I've also used forms when I have done a digital discussion, and in some cases I've allowed students to view a video, provide a comment, and then they could at the end see a summary of responses, this button right down here. And so what I would do is I could say, well, either I could let them go back and submit a second comment, or I could say that they could edit after they submit. So two different ways to kind of allow students. Sometimes you want them to take it once and be done. Sometimes you may want them to return and be able to edit their answer or add additional information. Up at the top, so we're in the General tab. I'm going to slide over to the Presentation tab. In the Presentation tab, we have the three options. The first one is to show a progress bar. And for anyone who's ever taken any sort of online surveys, either through Google Form or something like SurveyMonkey, especially long forms or long presentations, as you go through, it's like, when is this ever going to be finished? What the progress bar does is the little bottom of the screen, it allows them to say, okay, well, you're 30% of the way through, you're 50%, 75, 90, etc. So sometimes when I have a longer form, I will enable this just to kind of give them hope and faith to keep going. The next button we have here is to shuffle the question order. Now, as you start off with building your forms, let's say you wanted to do a quiz and you had question 1, question 2, question 3. And each question was individually contained, i.e. no question related to a previous question. Then this is a great tool, and especially because that's why you could conceivably have students sitting next to each other, and as they're working, they're seeing different questions at different times. However, as a former ELA teacher, a lot of times I'd have, say, a block of text, and then I'd have 4 or 5 questions, and each one of those 4 or 5 questions related to that block of text. So in that case, I would not want to click this box, because what would happen is, conceivably, if, let's say questions 5 through 8 dealt with, I wanted them to read a passage and then answer those questions. All of a sudden, if I shuffle the question order, they might get question 8 at the very beginning, and they say, well, what passage? I haven't seen the passage yet. So depending on how you've built your survey will determine whether or not this is a good idea to shuffle the question order. The third option, show link to submit another response. So as I was using the example of the back to school night survey, I wanted that link to be there because I didn't want to really have to manage it. I was standing at my door, greeting, shaking hands, kissing babies, smiling and waving, and I couldn't be in the room to queue up the survey for the next parent. But by including a link to another response, as one parent finished, the next parent could click the link and the survey would start over again. And at the very bottom here we have Google's confirmation message. Now the standard message is your response has been recorded, which is fine. Now in the classroom setting, a lot of times the survey was just one part of my daily lesson. So the second part, maybe I want to say, okay, thank you for completing this survey. Please shut down your device and go grab a book from the back, or please turn to this next activity. So you can kind of customize this if you would like to direct them to do another activity after they complete your survey. Even if that means, like, give your best friend a high five and come up to the front of the room and collect your book or paper or whatever it is. So you can definitely have some fun with this, and that was always a nice little Easter egg I included for some of my students. Moving across here, we have the quizzes. So I am going to come back to this a little bit later, but what basically this does is, by enabling quiz, it says it assigns point values to questions and allows for auto grading. Now there are some caveats in terms of the type of questions that Google can grade or not grade. And so that is something it does really well with, like, multiple choice and drop-down menus. It doesn't do so well with short answer or forms. However, for the advanced users out there, I will have a tool to kind of show how you can add some additional features for grading short answer questions as well. Scrolling down here, we have the release the grade option. This is a very much teacher preference, classroom preference. I know at one district we could review immediately after the quiz. In another district where I worked, it was much more, we had to have a separate day where we went through it together as a class. So the first one is immediately after submission. So basically, as soon as they click submit, they'll be able to see at least the multiple choice and the drop-down type questions. They will be able to see their grade for that. Or you can say, well, no, I'd rather do that later after manual review. So you have some options there on when you would like that to happen. Below here, we have respondents can see. The first one, missed questions. So these are questions they got incorrect. So some teachers, yes, I want them to be able to see the ones they got correct. You know, other classrooms or teachers that wouldn't be appropriate. So you can decide for yourself whether you want them to see the correct or incorrect questions. And then here we have the corresponding correct answers as well. This bottom checkbox is just point values. It tells the student how much each question is worth. And again, some teachers have different questions worth different amount of points. Some teachers, every question is worth the same. So again, this is very much a personal preference option. So I'm going to get out of here. So we're back at the home screen. We talked about color palette, the preview function, and settings. Next, we have the send button. So if you click on the send button, it's going to default to where you could actually send this directly in an email. Honestly, not an option I've used very frequently, although it is nice. The one thing that is of note is down at the very bottom here, we have the opportunity to add collaborators. And if I click on this, this is going to bring us back to the familiar screen of the sharing screen. Now, it is important to note, editors will be able to view and delete form responses. And I'm going to talk about a little bit later how you can control that. So let's say you had a co-teacher or you wanted to, this was something that your administrator asked you to do and share. You could certainly add them in here and provide them permissions. Notice the only option is can edit. It's not like other Google applications where you have the can view, can change, or can edit. It's strictly can edit. And so this would be, they would be able to see the questions, change questions, and see the responses. So I'm going to come back to this a little bit later because maybe you don't want them to see the form, you just want to share the responses. So I will touch on that a little bit later. Back here, I'm going to go back to the send button. So next to the email button, we have the Hyperlink Tool. And it provides a very long link. And this is if you were to build a quiz or a form and then utilizing Google Classroom, what you would do is you would copy this link and drop it into Google Classroom and send that out to your students. Now, they do have a built-in shortener here. You can actually get this even shorter if you were to take this and drop it into the Google URL link shortener. It actually cuts it down to right about probably 10 to 12 characters. So depending on whether you are typing this out, putting it on a flyer, maybe to send home, or writing it on your board, you might want to shorten this. If you're just dropping it into Google Classroom, the long link is fine. And then moving further to the right, we have the embed tool. And so this is something if a lot of teachers will actually utilize this and put a Google form on their website. Usually it's like a contact me form. And so again, if you're developing a website and are proficient in HTML, it's just something that you can cut and paste into the whatever website tool builder you're using, whether that's Google Sheets or Google Sites, or if you're using another one such as Vox or Weebly. You could embed a Google form directly into your page. So we've discussed the send option. Moving to the right, we have the three little snowmen. And anytime in Google, if you see three little dots or three horizontal lines, that's Google's universal code for there's a menu here. So if you go ahead and click on this, we have some options in terms of undo, make a copy, which is a really great tool, especially if you're creating, let's say, a quiz for multiple classes. You can utilize the make a copy feature. It also allows you to differentiate between, let's say you had some high achieving students and some students with IEPs or 504s. So for example, my wife, she's a science teacher at a 7th and 8th grade school, and for her students with IEPs, their accommodations, instead of 4 answer choices, A, B, C, and D, they only have 3 answer choices. And so what she does is when she utilizes this, she'll build the full quiz for the traditional students, make a copy of it, and then it'll say copy of, and then what you can do is, and then she can just go through and eliminate one of those distractor choices. Students all see the fact that they're taking a quiz. Students aren't aware that one student's quiz is differentiated for their learning ability. So that's a great tool to use. Of course, I have the option to trash something. Get a pre-filled link. This is a rarely used but very powerful tool, and I'm actually going to come back to this a little later in the presentation. You can print your Google form. You know, not really sure why, but I guess if that was a need, you certainly could do that. We have the option to add collaborators here as well. I think that's something that's really wonderful about Google. They provide multiple pathways to get to the same information. So you don't have to remember, oh, I have to go to the send button. You can get it right from here as well, which is really nice. Down here we have the script editor. And I will be perfectly honest with you, despite my technology prowess, I have never played with the script editor. Basically, the script editor allows you to kind of create, using Java, your own tools and kind of add-ons. For those of you who are attended last month's webinar with Gene Carboni, he mentioned a lady named Alice Keeler, who's kind of just a rock star in the Google world. She has created a lot of her own personal tools, and she's done that using the scripts editor. The last option we have in this menu is the add-ons menu. And the add-ons menu, again, something I'm going to return to at the end, not for, and this is really, this presentation is focused on that beginner, just starting out teacher. Once you get comfortable, once you feel very confident in your abilities with Google Forms, I do challenge you to explore some of the add-ons, and I'll highlight some of the ones at the end of this presentation that I am using. And when you go to the add-ons link, all of a sudden this little button here will show up. So that's why on your screen, if you've never used the add-ons in Google Forms, you probably don't see this little puzzle piece icon, but I do it on my screen. So again, these are some things we're going to come back to. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, and in almost every Google product, you'll see this little gray question mark down here, and this is where Google heard about all these teachers that were like, we want a quiz feature, and they actually went down here. If you have nothing to do on a Saturday night, Google will give you a tour, and you can walk through the tour. Of course, you could also rewatch this webinar on the AoP Tech YouTube channel. So we have a little menu tool here. There we go. We have an ability to add a video. And so because, of course, YouTube is a Google product, it integrates natively with YouTube. So let's say, for example, you would love some cat videos. You can search directly through here to find the funniest cat videos you've ever seen. Again, I love throwing in little Easter eggs into things sometimes. The nice thing about this is when you add a video this way, first of all, a couple things. One, I don't have to go to YouTube, find the video, hit another screen, come back. I think a lot of Google's advancements lately has been really about focusing to keep you in one tab, which is really great. Now, if I have gone and I've already done that work, I found the video on YouTube, I can just drop the URL right in here as well. And that's sometimes one of the nice features on YouTube is you can choose when to start that video, whether you start it at minute 2 or minute 3. So you could add that custom URL right in here, and that would work as well. A couple things about adding in the YouTube videos. When you add a YouTube video into a Google form, it locks them out of full screen mode. So as long as the video, it's going to give them kind of that standard smaller size YouTube screen. That's what they're going to see the video in. So if the video where they really need to be in full screen to be able to like see the details of it, I would actually recommend including a link and having them kind of pop over and watch a YouTube video in a separate tab and then return to your quiz. A popular feature, and a feature that I've actually submitted to Google that I really want, you'll notice the fact that in the URL, it was the YouTube URL. So it doesn't work if it's a VMNO video or if it's a Drive video, and that's something that has been a little frustrating for me, that I had some videos that were saved on my Google Drive, and in order to integrate them into a quiz, I had basically two options. I could paste the hyperlink to the video, and then as students got to that section of the video, they could click on the link, it would open in a new tab, and they could see the video. Or what Google really wants you to do is they would really like you to upload that video to YouTube and then put the link here. And so, I mean, certainly you could do that. You could do it on like an unlisted or a private channel if it was something that you really didn't want publicly out there. You could certainly do that. Personally, that extra step of having to then upload my videos was a little cumbersome for me. So hopefully, maybe if enough people send that feedback that to include Google Drive videos in this, perhaps that will be a feature added in the near future. Moving up, we have an option to add images, and this is our standard Google Uploader screen. You can click on here and drag and drop any images that you have already in your hard drive. You can drag them over and drop them here. You could take a snapshot, and while I think the students might love seeing like my smiling face in the middle of their quiz, you could also use this if you wanted to take a picture of, say, if you're doing a cell diagram, you were holding a model of a cell and pointing to a part, or if you had perhaps like a textbook and you wanted to take a picture of a specific page, or I know in ELA I would have like a little reading passage. If you have an image online that you found, you can drop the URL here. Of course, we also have, you're obviously the smiling face, there it is. Of course, Google Drive. So this is kind of the standard image uploader. The one feature that I did a PD earlier today, if a teacher has, say, Google Photos already on their phone, it's a great way to take a picture of something and grab it instantly without having to go through the process of uploading it. And I'll talk a little bit more about, there's some other areas to add images within Google Forms. The next one moving up, we have, it looks like two T's. This is a title. So let's say you wanted to do where you had separate pages. And I talked about maybe a quiz where the first part I had a video and I wanted them to answer the questions, and then the next page I had a reading passage and I wanted them to answer questions. So if you wanted to, you could add in this title page. I actually use this as more directions. So if I want to add in some specific directions, I can use the title page feature to add in maybe something like, hey, please make sure you watch the video before answering the question, something like that. So now that we've talked about the menu on the side here, now what I want to do is I'm going to talk about the different question types. And for us today, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip back and forth so that you can see a preview of what it's going to look like. I'm just going to write test question here. Oh, wait, here's a really cool thing. Let's say I am doing that t-shirt sizes. I can say what size t-shirt, and check this out. This is the coolest thing. I don't know if you guys can see it, but Google reads my question and figures out, hey, these are common responses. If I type in, do you agree? I get the yes, no, maybe, and it automatically does that for me. It's so cool. I love it. So for right now, I'm just going to do sample test question here. And notice I have the little photo icon right here. So maybe my test question is in the form of a picture. You could add that, certainly. Now, it does default to multiple choice. I actually am going to start with short answer. So short answer, and then I'm going to flip over here to preview. So sample test, whatever my question is here, probably, what is your name is always usually my first one. And it provides them a small text field to write in. But let's say I wanted an email address. Back to school, and I'm collecting that information from the parents, and I want to make sure that they type in a real email address, none of this fake email address stuff. There's a tool down here in the very bottom. We have the 3 little dots for data validation, and this is very cool. You can tell I get excited about this stuff. So I have some drop downs. So under number, if I click that and I say, well, this is it's a text, and I want to make sure it's an email address. And what's going to happen if I preview this? If I put something, it forces me to make it look like an email address, which is kind of cool. In addition to something like that, yes, I would like to go away. In addition to something like that, you have maybe you want it to be a URL. Maybe you want it to contain a certain word or phrase. So sometimes when I'm working with elementary, I could say, well, make it, their answer has to contain, say, the color red, and red has to be part of the answer. So I can make sure that it contains that in there. And then you can even say in the custom error text, you can say like, well, what color do you see, or something like that. So you could really kind of guide them, give them hints if you wanted to. For my math teachers out there, you have the ability to control the number. So let's say you want all your answers in a whole number. You don't want to deal with fractions or decimals. Or maybe you want to say it's less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. So you have a lot of features here. And then when length. So and this is something that I really like. You can control the maximum or minimum character amount. So, I want, let's say, an answer between 150 characters and 300. I don't want, just one word, nor do I want the Great American Novel. I want kind of, the just right option. So you can control that, and let's say I say, well, the minimum, it has to be, 45 characters long, and then I can say, hey, please add more. So that way, if I start typing, they know that until they get all the way to 40 characters, there we go. It finally went away, and now they can move on to the next step of the survey. So it actually will lock them and prevent them from moving on until that data validation is satisfied. In addition to that, regular expression, I really haven't used this one a lot, but you can, it does contain, doesn't contain matches. So that's a nice tool as well. So that's down here in the data validation tool. Also down here is the required slider. And if you're giving a quiz, I really do recommend making the questions required because it forces them to answer it and prevents them from moving on. Now, sometimes when let's say I'm giving a feedback survey, in fact, you guys are going to take one at the end of this webinar, some of the questions are required. For example, the email address one will be required because I want to make sure I get your email address, and I'll explain why. But then there's some other sections where it asks like your thoughts and opinions, or there's a section for any additional comments. Well, some people might not have any comments. Don't tell me to grow hair. I've heard that one a lot. So for some questions, if I want to make sure that they answer them, I can click this little button and make it required. And so if it's a quiz, I definitely want to make sure that this is checked. If it's a feedback form, some questions I may make required, some I may make optional. So we've talked about, and of course we have the trash can and then the duplicate features as well. So we talked about the short answer. The paragraph, it does the same thing, it just gives them a longer text field. So the short answer one was stopped about here, the longer one provides them with a longer space. Moving down, we have the multiple choice option, and you'll notice the fact that we have several options here. So I could say, this was maybe it's what's your favorite color, and the first one's blue, and the next one is red, and the next one is green, and after that I could say or add other. So that way, when they see this, they could say, well, my favorite color is blue or green, or the other, they could just say, pink, let's say. So a nice tool as well. You also can add pictures. So actually, I can actually show you one that I did recently. I had a PD at Carroll, and let's see here. For the teachers, let's see if I can find it. There we go. So for them, I wanted to utilize this ability to add pictures. Come on. So for their first question, worth 10 points, please select the current Carroll president. And so here I have my options, and I was able to upload pictures. So a nice way, especially with younger kids, you could include pictures, or let's say if you wanted to, your question was on find the ATP telophase or the Krebs cycle, you could have them identify it and say, well, that's the Krebs cycle, organic chem. Oh, it was many years ago. So moving on, we talked about the multiple choice questions. Underneath multiple choice, a very similar option are checkboxes. Now, checkboxes also have data validation. And so I can say, well, I want to make sure that they pick at least 2 answers, let's say. So now, if I only check one, it says, please select 2 options. I can say, well, I like blue and green. So you can, with checkboxes, they're not limited to one response, which is nice. I also have an option, and I had this back when we talked about multiple choice as well, to shuffle the option order. And this is a great tool, especially if you are using this for quizzes, because what that would do is, so if I shuffle the option order, now I put it in as blue, red, and green. So one student might see it like that. The next student, red might be up top, green might be up top. And to get kind of scientific, the reason that this can be helpful in terms of if you're looking at data validation is a lot of times people will cue in on that first option. And so by randomizing it, not only does it increase your quiz/test security, but it also then hopefully kind of gives you better data at the end. So that is a nice option as well. Underneath checkboxes, we move to drop-down menu. I like using the drop-down menu, and I'll show you what that looks like, when I have a lot of options and I don't want to have, let's say I had 14 colors listed. Well, if I had 14 colors in a multiple choice, my form would go on for quite some time, whereas here I can just say one or the other. So, another new feature is the file upload button. Now, this is specific to only in your domain. So, for example, if I come up here and I was in settings, and if this box is not checked, so for me it says restricted to the Archdiocese of Philadelphia because that's our Google domain. Yours would probably say your school right there. If I uncheck this, you will notice that the file upload is grayed out. So this only works if you have this button checked. So it basically would only be for your students in your classroom. Now I recognize the fact that if I wanted students to upload a file, I could certainly have them do that through Google Classroom. And I think that it really kind of comes down to sometimes for them to complete a survey and then upload a file would be helpful in this format. Sometimes it may be better to turn it into Google Classroom. So this does kind of vary on the type of question you're asking. The thing that I like about this, so first of all, it says, hey, by the way, you know, it's only going to be within your domain. Just be aware of that. And I say, okay. What's nice about it, I can choose how many files, I can choose the size of said files, and where it says file types allowed, I can say, well, you know what, we're working on a video project, so I only want video files. Or I can say, you know what, we're working on our resumes, and I want to make sure that the resumes in a PDF format, because we've talked about why, you know, a protected document format or PDF, why that's useful. So the nice thing about this is you can control the file type, versus on a Google Classroom, you know, you don't have that ability to control the specific type, or maybe it's an image file, an audio file. So this does have some cool features, let's say. Moving down, we have linear scale. So this is your standard, on a scale of 1 to 5, how amazing was whatever, the story we read, the presentation, the field trip we went on. And you can control whether it starts at 0 and whether it goes to 5 or to 10. I do encourage, after having used forms and surveys frequently in my classrooms, I thought, you know, if I asked them, you know, what did you think of X presentation? I assumed that they knew that 0 was I didn't like it and 10 was it was epic. I have since learned that it is wrong to assume those type of things. So, for example, you might say 0 is terrible, and OMG, this is amazing. And you can see what that looks like. Terrible. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. So you would allow them to kind of have an idea of what does 0 mean, what does 10 mean. So if you only have one question, the linear scale works really well. But let's say I wanted to ask multiple questions, but on the same linear scale. What I would do is I would use the next one underneath, which is the multiple choice grid. And this kind of looks a little overwhelming, and it does take, I recommend, you know, putting in a couple values and then using the preview tool to see if it looks like it should look like. And so one of the things I did in my classroom is I wanted a quick, easy way to record student grades in the moment. So for example, when I walked around and I said, okay guys, get out your homework on your desk, and I had my iPad in my hand, I didn't want to have to go through the gradebook function, because it didn't display right on my iPad, and I couldn't really open up an Excel document, and it would have been too complicated to try to type in each cell. And so this is, when I talked about the uses, this was kind of a way that I created my own user interface. And so I can show you a sample of this. So what I did was I had a generic homework grade. And the nice thing was all I had to do, I could say, okay, the type of assignment, this was, you know, our news article. And then all I'd have to do is, as I'd walk around the room, now I had pretty good kids, you know, AC Slater, Zach Morris, those are the top-notch kids, so I would have it pre-filled with hundreds, you know, but Jesse was off his game that day, so he got a 0, and Kelly was absent. You can tell him to Saved by the Bell fan. And so what this did is it has allowed me to create a really easy way to see the student responses, to get it into an Excel format. Because to go through and do this manually would have been too time-consuming. So all I did is I bookmarked this page. Well, I bookmarked this page. And I mentioned that I had it pre-filled. So to do that, what I did, and then I said I'd come back to it, over here on our 3 snowmen, I have an option to get pre-filled link. And so what I did, so I said these kids were pretty good, and so I said, okay, well, you know what, I'm going to pre-fill in 100, because most of the time everyone does their homework and they get 100. And then what it does, it says, here's a link for your pre-filled responses. And so what I would do is drop this link in, save it as a bookmark on my iPad, and now I have a pre-filled in link. So this can, again, save some time when you're in that process of walking through the classroom, grading, telling kids to sit back down and do your work, and what are you doing? It kind of one less thing for you to have to worry about. So I really like that pre-filled option. And that was an example of using the multiple choice grid. I had many students' names, I had categories running down, I had rows and columns. The last two options, we have the ability to add in a date. The nice thing about this is when in your survey, maybe you're doing an activity where you say, hey, when are you going to have your rough draft done by? When are you going to work on your note cards? This gives them a calendar feature. And when collecting data, this makes sure that everybody's day and date is going to be in the same format instead of having, February 12th and 2/15 and different formats in there. And when it comes to having that data, you want it all in kind of the standard format. They have the same option with date as they do, or excuse me, with time as they do date, where you can type in, a specific time of day, and it would give you a standard format. A couple things about the quizzes. Some recommendations. I definitely recommend you collect the email addresses. It makes sure that the person taking the survey is who they say they are. I check the box where I limit it to just one response. I don't allow them to submit another response. I don't want them taking the quiz multiple times. We talked about that shuffling order to make sure that, if you just have a straight vocab quiz where let's say every question is independent, feel free to shuffle. If you have those pages where read this, answer the questions, look at this, answer the questions, you want to be careful about that. In the settings menu, you're going to enable quizzes. This tells Google that, hey, this is a quiz, I want you to grade it. I definitely want to make sure that all the questions are required, because I don't want a student to just not answer a question. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you do want, if a student leaves it blank, they didn't answer, and that's fine. But for me personally, I wanted to force them, no, you're going to try, you're going to answer that question. Some options. We talked about the ability to shuffle the response, like the A, B, C, D. You can shuffle that order. You can shuffle the question order. The one we haven't discussed yet is the answer feedback, and I want to show you that in a second. Now, the one other kind of caveat to the quizzes is the fact that Google is only so smart in the respect that it will only grade certain types of questions. And right now you're looking at your multiple choice, your checkbox, your dropdown, your linear scale questions. Those are the ones that it can grade. It can't grade short answer or those long responses. Now, when I move into my final part of the presentation, I will talk about some add-ons that will kind of do some of those short answer responses, but for right now, I just wanted to highlight that only certain question types it can grade. So I want to demonstrate that. So let's see here, where are we? This one. All right. So for this one, I'm going to say it's going to be a multiple choice question. I'm going up to my settings. I'm going to say, yes, this is a quiz. So sample question, multiple choice. I'm just going to fill in. So let's say we have blue. I'm going to go back to the colors. Red, green, etc. So I've told Google in the settings menu that this is going to be a quiz. So now if I wanted to auto grade it, first of all, I want to make sure that it's required. Down here in the bottom where it says answer key, I can click on the answer key option, and from here I can decide, well, you know what, I want the students to know that this question is only worth 1 point. I can also say what happened, so let me back up a second. So when we were in the settings menu under quizzes, this part down here, respondents can see missed questions and correct answers. So if I have those buttons checked, I can, when I'm in the answer feedback section, let's say they got it incorrect. I could say something like, hey, rewatch this Khan Academy video. Or maybe I want to say like, hey, why don't you go back and look at, pages 32 to 46 of your textbook. I can include a link to say, okay, you got this wrong. Why don't you go back and watch this video and maybe try again? You have the same ability that if they got the correct answer, you could say like, great job. And certainly this would be a tool if you wanted to, throw in those Easter eggs, or like, after they get a hard question correct, maybe you have a happy picture or something that shows up. You could certainly do that. This is, I don't really give answer feedback for correct answers. Sometimes, depending on whether it's a true quiz or maybe it's just an assessment activity, just a regular formative assessment for me, sometimes I will include kind of hints for the incorrect answers. And this is also another way to differentiate, for your student struggling learners. And so basically, as I go through and as I add my questions, oh, I forgot the most important thing. I need to tell Google what the correct answer is. So if the answer is blue, I can say, and it gives me a little checkbox. And now I know that if I take this question, I'll see it says 1 point over here. I have the little asterisk here that means it's required. And depending on what I answer, so in fact, I think, let's see if it'll, I didn't, I guess add that feature. Let's see if I can, quizzes, general, presentation, good, cancel, answer key, feedback. Oh, I didn't have anything. Let's say try again. I'll save it. The correct answer is blue. Let's see how it works. So if I check red, it's going to say, it didn't do it. I have to play around with, oh, there we go. So sample question, I got it incorrect. It shows the correct answer. Feedback here, try again. So you do have some additional features. Honestly, most of the time for teachers, I would just go through, identify the correct answer, and move on. Now you do have an option that you can select more than one correct answer. So if I say that either red or blue is correct, I can select that. And this holds true for whether I'm doing multiple choice. If I'm doing a checkbox, I can choose multiple answers as correct answers. So we talked a little bit about quizzes. Next thing I want to talk about, some of the once you have grown accustomed, you've done a couple forms, you've used them for maybe some exit tickets or some intro tickets, admit tickets. Now you're comfortable. Now you can start adding on some add-ons. So the first one that I like is called Flubaroo, and what Flubaroo will do is Flubaroo will grade those short answer questions for you. So if I type in what is the capital of Pennsylvania and they type in Pittsburgh, it'll say nope, that's wrong. Harrisburg is correct. To do that, what you're going to do is in your Google form, you've gone to the add-ons, and sorry, I went too fast. I clicked on the snowman. I went down here to add-ons, and from here we have a wide variety of add-ons, and basically anything with a green check means that I've already used it. But there's a whole bunch of really some very powerful ones on here. Flubaroo is one of those add-ons. Let's see where it is. Once you have added it, this icon will show up, and then it will live up here. And what it will do is it allows you to automatically grade basically those short answer questions for you. Spelling will count though, so that's something to keep in mind. Another add-on that I really like for my math teachers out there, GMath. This is another one that kind of Google heard that people were kind of doing a workaround with it, and they added it directly into Google Forms. Basically what it does is it provides a syntax so you can write these nice looking equations directly into your Google form. So that's a really nice one. Choice Eliminator. This is one, so as an ELA teacher, one of the things I did was I had daily, or for big papers, they had to come and meet with me. And so I created a Google form and I sent it out to them. I said, hey, I'm available for conference at 10, 10:15, 11, 11:30. And what Choice Eliminator does, and this works really well if you want to do like parent-teacher conferences or student conferences, is once that first student, let's say they went in there and took that 10 o'clock slot, the second student who goes on and takes a survey, well, that 10 o'clock slot's not available anymore. Only, let's say, the 10, 15, 11:30 slots are remaining. So this is a great tool to use. The next one underneath here is called Form Recycler. And this is similar, so if anyone has ever used Google Slides, and I'm building a slide presentation and I want to go and I want to grab a slide from another presentation. Google Slides has that ability natively. Forms doesn't. So Form Recycler, what it does is, and I can actually, I'll show you kind of how it works. So I click on, where is it? GMath, Form Publisher. Actually, I don't think I've added that one. It basically will bring up the other forms that I have and will allow me to grab questions. So if I wanted to, I've started a library of forms, I could use that tool to grab questions from other forms. The last one, and this is one that you guys are actually going to get to experience tonight, is something called Form Publisher. Form Publisher is awesome. Basically what it does is after someone has completed a form, it takes the data and it basically takes, and on the back end what it's doing is really a mail merge. And so I can take the information from a Google form such as name and email. Remember I said that email is a required question. So the reason it is because at the end of the day I'm going to give you guys a link and ask for your feedback, because I believe in getting feedback and growing as an educator. And so I asked for your email address, because what's going to happen is after you take my my feedback survey and you tell me what you liked and what you didn't like, you're going to get a beautiful certificate of completion suitable for framing or display in a public place. And I'm using Form Publisher to do it. So you're going to type in your name, your email address, and what Form Publisher is going to do is going to take that. It's going to link with a template that I've made, and it's going to automatically email you out a filled out template. So for certification, or if there's tons of uses, but it's a really cool tool that I like. Again, these are kind of advanced. Once you get comfortable, Form Publisher is a great tool.
Thanks so much, Aaron, for such a great in-depth look at Google Forms. If you are looking for additional ways to use Google Forms and its features, head on over to AoP Tech's YouTube channel and check out the Google Forms playlist. There's a great number of how-to videos that'll help you get more out of your Google Forms for you and your students. For additional e-learning resources and support request form, visit AoP Tech's website at www.aoptech.org. You'll find links to a great number of e-learning resources for educators and leaders, as well as the AoP Professional Development and Support Request form. As always, be sure to follow us on social media for all updates on our events at AoP Tech, as well as the hashtag AoP Tech. Thanks for watching. For the AoP Tech team, I'm Annabelle Dotsman.